A terrible, drawn-out, avoidable tragedy born of rampant land-grabbing, hatred and greed. Monopoly is a game for 2 to 6 players designed by Elizabeth J. Meggie and Charles Darrow. Now for many gamers, Monopoly is the worst game ever made, you little bastard, because it's so famous, it defines our cherished hobby in its least flattering light, often long, boring, mean-spirited, often weighted in favour of luck over skill. There are lots of reasons to hate this little box, but for one video, I would like to talk about the 10,000 reasons we owe Monopoly a great debt. And for that, I need to ignore the advice of one Basil Fawlty and mention the war. A hateful series of embittered conflicts, a theatre of misery and suffering that swept the globe and whose effects are still being felt to this day. Monopoly was the most popular game in the world in the 1940s, when also bad thing World War II was. Over the course of the war, over 230,000 Allied soldiers were imprisoned in prisoner of war camps, and facilitating escapes was serious business. Those who made it home brought back valuable info about conditions within occupied countries, boosted morale at home, and provided hope to those still held in captivity. But it wasn't just about getting prisoners home, as I found out when I spoke to Ace historian and author of Ace book It's All a Game, Tristan Donovan.
And the idea was partly we get our troops back, but it was also partly if people keep escaping in Germany, then the Germans have to keep sending troops to these camps to keep them under control. So it was basically to disrupt the German army as much as possible. So even if people didn't manage to escape, they still have to spend time going, well, we'll send those troops to go look for them. So it was really just make the Germans' life as much hellish as they possibly can.
In order to focus on helping POWs escape the camps, a new branch of the War Office was created in December 1939, the 8th sequel in the popular military intelligence franchise MI9. And much like Fast and Furious 9, this installment promised to be the silliest one yet, coming to be defined by daring escape and evasion missions, surreal espionage, and insane gadgets hidden in the strangest of places. Also, I'm pretty sure it had John Cena in it as well, because this was also a branch dedicated to camouflaging troops and equipment overseas so that the enemy couldn't see them. That's John Cena's catchphrase. MI9 had small beginnings, established in room 424 of the Metropole Hotel, now the Corinthia in London, but powered by respect, loyalty, and most importantly, hustle, they soon set about making their mark, helped by the man who was almost definitely the inspiration for James Bond's Q, Christopher Clayton Hutton. Hutton, or Clutty as he was known to his mates, which makes him sound like a clumsy Pokemon, which is delightful, was the best type of British madman. 21-year-old Clutty met Harry Houdini once and challenged him to escape from a box that Clutty had designed, which Houdini did. No, really, Christopher Clayton Hutton is excellent, and from that point on in his life, he was obsessed with illusion, disguise, and trickery, and that was evident in a range of inventions he knocked out for the war effort that were ingenious and fell just short of being an exploding pen.
We don't really go in for that anymore.
For aircrew, he designed special boots with hollow heels that held knives, maps, a compass and file, and could also be disguised as civilian shoes by a set of detachable leggings. He designed bicycle pumps that were also torches, a telescope disguised as a cigarette holder, water purification tablets that looked like sweets, compasses so tiny they could be hidden inside bars of soap and on the backs of buttons. I'm genuinely disappointed he didn't design a rocket-launching boombox. The only issue was getting enough equipment into the POW camps. Now, some of these tools were good, but they could only smuggle one gadget at a time. But then, an incredible stroke of luck led MI9 to John Waddington Limited. See, by far, the most valuable thing to smuggle to a soldier trapped behind enemy lines is a map. And not just any map, a silk map. So, why silk? Well, because silk can be screwed up to fit in the tiniest of places' winky face without being damaged. It can get wet and still maintain its integrity, and also the ink won't run. Don't get water on the mic, don't get water on the mic, don't get water on the mic, don't get water on the mic. Didn't get water on the mic. And also, the most important thing about silk is that it folds silently. Unlike, you know. small! Get small!
Waddington's its history is in printing, not board games. So one of the things it got into doing, and it was the only people in the UK who could do it, was printing on silk, which is incredibly difficult. They used to produce these silk programs for the Royal Variety performance, and it's a very complicated task. They did it on rayon, the artificial silk, and you have to treat it with all these chemicals. You have to stretch it very carefully and print it on very slowly, and you do anything wrong at any point is ruined. So it's a really specialist way of printing, and they'd figured it out, and they were pretty, as far as I can tell, the only people in the UK who could actually print on silk at the time.
So you've got this company, which is the only one who can print on silk. You need to find a way to get these silk maps and a compass, because what use is a map without a compass? And then you realize that one really big item, not only allowed but encouraged into care packages going into these camps, is board games. According to the Geneva Convention, prisoners should be given pastimes to help occupy their time, and also the Germans thought that playing board games would distract the POWs from trying to escape and make them easier to control. And what does John Waddington also print? Pinky, are you pondering what I'm pondering?
I think so, Brain. But what if the chicken won't wear the nylons?
Monopoly was the most popular game on the planet. It was big enough to smuggle an entire escape kit inside, and so MI9 hatched a plan to help prisoners get out of jail free. In 1940, an MI9 operative called E.D. Alston approached the company, who agreed to help aid the war effort, and so began the building of Escape Monopoly.
So you have your game board, and obviously you've got, if you remember, Monopoly, it's got like a paper sheet over the top glued down onto the board. So what they did is, before putting that sheet with the actual board spaces on it, they carved little holes into the actual cardboard of the board. So they chisel like a little thin strip and put in a tiny compass in there, or a little kind of square, and fold up a silk map to put in there. And then they place the actual board, the paper bit over it, and glue it on. So basically you couldn't see it from opening the board, it was kind of hidden below.
Not only did the game boards contain a secret map, compass and files, but Waddington also hid Reichmark bills in the Monopoly money to spend on the run, and also to bribe the German guards to look the other way, because after all, you can't spell 1000-year Reich without rich. Didn't get any Nazi money in my tea, counting that as a win. As requested by military intelligence, Waddington's made lots of different types of maps, and was tasked with providing a distinguishing clue as to which board contained which. A full stop on Mayfair meant that the board contained a silk map of Norway, Sweden and northern Germany. A full stop on free parking meant it contained a map of northern France and German borders. Games printed and assembled were then delivered to King's Cross Station to be picked up by actual spies. This is so cool! But making the boards is only half the story. Now MI9 had to get the Monopoly boards to the prisoners.
The obvious way was like, well, British Red Cross parcels. They're going there all the time with food supplies. But the problem with putting them in there is that, well, if the Germans find this escape equipment, then they're going to stop taking Red Cross parcels. So all our soldiers will be left without food and so on. So let's not do that. We'll use a charity, but we'll invent charities. So basically what they did is they found bombed out buildings all over the country and used their addresses to basically become new charities that were just raising money locally to send stuff to the prisoners, some entertainments to see them through the dull days trapped in Colditz and so on. So they invented all these names. It's like the Liverpool Men's Working Club, or the British Lady Comfort Society, which that name cracks me up. It obviously meant something very different in the 40s. It's got to feel slightly different now. They send a letter to the head of the prison of war camp saying, oh, we've raised some money locally to send some stuff out. And then they're boxed up, and they use local papers from each area. So if the charity was supposedly in Liverpool, they'd buy all the Liverpool papers, scrunch them all up and use that as padding to kind of go, hey, look, it really is from Liverpool.
Prisoners being sent into combat were briefed about looking out for care packages, and inside, MI9 would include a letter from the charity with quotes that would act as clues, like Matthew chapter 7 verse 7, "Ask and it shall be given you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you." Cheeky Bible lols. And it worked. Other board games occasionally got rumbled. Jacks of London was also commissioned by MI9 to produce chess sets with contraband inside, or Snakes and Ladders with the same. When X-ray machines were deployed at German POW camps, the German authorities began to capture the escape materials, but not Monopoly. Ever. Not once, which is bloody good news for Waddingtons, because by engaging in secret warfare, they were running a pretty big risk.
When all the documentation surrounding this scheme was declassified in the 1980s and everything came to light, former prisoners of war actually wrote to the company now called Waddingtons to confirm they'd seen and used these escape Monopoly boards, including one officer, Captain Bill Lawton, who was part of the escape committee in the infamous Colditz prisoner of war castle. He said, and I quote, "Many of the items contained therein were invaluable to escapees from the castle, both successful and abortive." You know what? It's nice to get fan mail. In fact, these daring escapes from that castle, using escape kits the kind of which were found in Monopoly, actually inspired a different classic board game, Escape from Colditz, which is also kinda shit.
So where can we find one of these escape Monopolies? That's the tragic thing, because none have come to light, because any that did make it into the camps, part of the escaping process was, after extracting the tools, doing what many gamers have wanted to do over the years, and that's burning the Monopoly board to leave no evidence behind. But apparently during the war, loads of these boards went missing travelling through Italian customs, so it's perfectly possible there's an escape Monopoly board right now in an Italian car boot sale.
Italians, check your attics.
Over the course of the war, MI9 had over 240 different maps produced of European and North African regions, with at least 1.7 million copies distributed to prisoners via Monopoly and other games. Head of Waddington's Norman Watson said, "We reckon that 10,000 people used the Monopoly map." The plan was so successful that the Americans did their own version of it out of their MIS-X branch, starting in 1942. Instead of engaging Parker Brothers, however, the American distributors of Monopoly, they just bought hundreds of copies, steamed off the paper, and got to work.
Let's end with this story. David Bowling was a prisoner at Stalag Luft 3, a camp that was located in what is today Żargon in western Poland. In 1943, Bowling attempted a solo escape mission, which was punishable by death. Now, the reason why was leaders inside the camp had learned that the SS was attempting to take control of prisoner of war camps from the Luftwaffe and proposed executing all prisoners of war. In order to free up the security forces, they could be sent to the front lines. The SS are wankers. A message had to be sent home about this plan, and fast. So Bowling was chosen because he spoke good German. He was issued civilian clothing, forged ID, and a train schedule, and he escaped from that prisoner of war camp. And after days in the wilderness, he eventually made it to neutral Zurich, and he relayed his message, which is amazing. But more than that, it was reported he also travelled with the following on his person: German money, a silk map, a tiny compass, and a jiggly saw, which were the exact tools that were packed into American Monopoly escape boards. Well done, Monopoly. Your baffling popularity helped thousands of prisoners to their freedom in one of the worst times in human history. But if only you weren't less shit. And that is our video. If you liked it, please consider sharing around and subscribing to more Phenomenerds content, because we'll be doing more board game history videos. And we also have a lot of other great videos in order to get you into the greatest hobby in the world, which is board gaming. So join Phenomenerds today and get on board.